name is Grace Mahalik and welcome back to my channel. This second video that I'm going to do is actually going to be focusing a little bit more on infant loss, um, miscarriage, and pregnancy losses. Um, I had my first child in September of 1993. I gave birth to a little girl who is now 22 years old and healthy. My second pregnancy ended in a miscarriage in March of 1995. I found out that I was pregnant in an emergency room after being extremely ill. Um, I then went home and scheduled my first OB appointment. Before I could even make it to that appointment a week later, I started bleeding. Was told that, actually got a phone call from the doctor's office after I called to let them know what was going on, that they didn't want me to show up for my OB appointment. I was very young, probably 20, maybe 19. Nobody explained to me what happened with a miscarriage. Nobody explained the process to me. I was just told not to bother coming in, simply because I was bleeding. Nobody explained, was I losing the baby? What was happening? Um, I remember finally going in for a doctor's appointment after having to push and push and push and push to get that appointment, only to be told, yes, you are miscarrying, you are losing the pregnancy. Um, at that point, I kind of put that aside, figured that I had miscarried that pregnancy, and it wasn't up until like a month later that I was still not feeling normal, was still feeling pregnant. Um, I took a home pregnancy test again, and it was still coming up positive. At that point, I went to go seek the advice of a new physician. I changed physicians, and I was told that it was an incomplete miscarriage. I ended up having a DNC to complete the miscarriage process, and a few months later, got pregnant again. I gave birth to my son March of 1996. Um, when he was extremely young, I ended up getting pregnant again. And 24 weeks into that pregnancy, it was Christmas Eve, and I went in for a ultrasound to check the state of that pregnancy and make sure that my baby was healthy. We found out we were having a little girl, and it wasn't until a day after Christmas that I got a phone call from my doctor's office telling me that my daughter had more fluid in her brain than she should. Nobody really explained that either as to what that meant. We needed to go see a maternal fetal medicine specialist, and that appointment was 2 weeks away. They recommended an amniocentesis. Of course, they suspected a genetic defect, and at that point, I refused the amniocentesis, which I ended up doing New Year's Eve with my normal physician, and finally went in for that appointment a week or so later. Um, Probably not even a week or so later. I think they ended up getting me in way sooner than they were supposed to. That level 2 ultrasound revealed that my daughter had a condition known as a lobar holoprosencephaly. A lobar holoprosencephaly basically is a closed form almost of anencephaly. Um, just a tiny bit different. In anencephaly, the baby's skull does not form over the brain. The brain and the skull is open, exposing the brain. In a lobar holoprosencephaly, in my daughter's case, what brain tissue had been there at one point had been crushed by cerebral spinal fluid. So brain matter that they could see that was left was just her cerebellum. We were told it was incompatible with life, and if I tried to continue the pregnancy, there was a chance that she could die in utero, which would put my life in danger, and that if we did decide to carry, she may not even make it a couple of hours after birth. That was a really tough situation. I am not somebody who believes in abortion of any sort. To each their own, of course, but I don't believe in abortion. And for me to have to make a choice at that point, I had a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old, of what I was going to do and how I could take care of those two and also take care of a baby with so many medical issues. They were predicting that she would have constant seizures. She would basically be in a vegetative state, hooked up to lots of machines if she did happen to make it out of the hospital and make it home. I didn't see any out at that point. I knew inside of myself I could not continue that pregnancy. I knew that I had 2 very young children, and I also knew that it was going to be an extreme burden on her father and I to try to take care of her in that state, if we even made it to that point. So January 6th, my labor was induced. They have various procedures that they use for pregnancy terminations and late term. It's considered a late term abortion, even though you're not left with many options. There are many different ways for them to induce that pregnancy, one of which is to inject the fetus with saline so that they can abort the fetus that way before the fetus is born. I didn't want them to do anything like that. I basically and simply wanted them to induce my labor the way they would with, or the way they had with my other 2 children. If she was going to be born that early, I wanted her to be born alive, so I had a little bit of time to spend with her. They predicted many different things, that she might cry, that she might, expect her to be flailing her arms, having problems breathing because her lungs weren't mature. 28 hours into labor, January 7th, 1997, my daughter Angeline Dominique was born. She weighed 1 pound, 2.5 ounces. She lived for 3 hours. Very quiet, very still, not what they had told us, basically what was going to happen. I didn't have to push with her. It was one of those rare occasions that they talk about. You see it in the news every now and again where a baby actually comes out with a sack of water intact, and she did. That was a very rough situation. That pregnancy loss, birth defects leave you with a sense of feeling responsible, feeling like you caused it, something you did made it all go wrong. I questioned whether I had taken enough folic acid during the pregnancy. I know I had not drank or smoked or did anything to put that pregnancy in jeopardy of any way, shape, or form, but you can't help but feeling responsible for it. Pregnancy loss is a very hard situation that takes its toll on a married couple. I think I saw statistics somewhere way back when that said 80% of couples that lose a pregnancy or a baby don't survive that loss. Their marriage ends in divorce. That did end up happening, but that wasn't until a good 17, 18 years later. I think for me, the first step in dealing with the grief was to stop holding other people responsible, and then eventually to stop holding myself responsible. You never get over it, but it's definitely something that when it first happens, you want to blame everybody around you because it makes the pain that much easier. In the end, that didn't work for me. It ended up being a situation where I had to learn not to blame those people around me, and then eventually to stop blaming myself. Grief and loss make you do many crazy things. They make you think and do many crazy things. And people don't know how to deal with it. Family, friends, they don't know how to deal with it. And you'll get a lot of comments being made. You can always have another baby. there's a reason for everything. That was the biggest one for me. There's always a reason for everything. But knowing that there was a reason for everything didn't change the fact that my arms were still empty, the fact that I didn't have my little girl, and the fact that it didn't bring her back. So why? What was this reason behind this? So in these series of videos coming up, I'm going to start explaining some of the grief process, maybe some ways to cope and handle it a little easier. It's never going to be an easy process, but things that will make life get a little bit back to normal. And as time goes by, it will get less painful. And that question of, or that statement of, there's a reason for everything, truly, as crappy of a comment as that is for somebody to make, as days, weeks, months, and years start to go by, you will genuinely see that there really is a greater plan and a reason for all of it. Subscribe, share. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. This is going to be, again, a series of videos that is kind of explaining my take on grief and loss and what I did to make things better. And we will go from there step by step. Hopefully these videos will be helping you to deal with the grieving and loss process.